The faint scent of wildflowers drifted through the open church window as Nora Sullivan stood frozen at the altar, her heart hammering against her ribs like a frightened bird. When Pastor Mitchell reached for her hand to place the ring, she recoiled violently, knocking over a vase of prairie flowers. The collective gasp from the wedding guests echoed through the small church in Red River, New Mexico, on that warm spring day in 1875. "I can't," she whispered, tears streaming down her pale face. "I'm sorry, I just can't." Before anyone could stop her, Nora gathered her white satin skirts and fled down the aisle, pushing past bewildered guests and ignoring the shocked calls of her name. The heavy church door slammed behind her with a finality that silenced the commotion inside. Outside, the merciless New Mexico sun beat down on her elaborate wedding dress as she stumbled down the dirt road, her veil catching in the breeze. The small frontier town of Red River spread before her a collection of wooden buildings, hitching posts, and dusty streets that had been her home for only 3 months. Hardly enough time to have become a bride. Nora found refuge behind the general store, collapsing against the rough wooden wall as sobs racked her body. Memories flashed unbidden cruel hands, pain, darkness memories she tried to bury when she fled Boston for this wild territory. She'd convinced herself that marrying Harold Wilkins, the town's bank manager, would fix everything. That somehow his gentle manner would erase the trauma that made even the slightest touch feel like fire on her skin. She was wrong. "Miss, are you all right?" Nora startled at the deep voice, pressing herself against the wall as a tall figure approached. She recognized him vaguely, one of the cowboys who worked at the Rocking J Ranch outside town. His face was partially obscured by the shadow of his Stetson, but she could make out concerned blue eyes and a weathered face that had seen its share of sun and hardship. "Please," she whispered, "don't come any closer." To her surprise, he nodded and took a step back, leaning against a barrel several feet away. "Name's Wade Lancaster," he said simply. "Seems to me like you've had yourself quite a morning." "Everyone saw," Nora said, wiping furiously at her tears. "Everyone saw me run." Wade pulled out a handkerchief and extended it toward her, then seemed to think better of it. He placed it on a crate between them instead. "Sometimes running's the only sensible thing to do," he said. "Especially when your heart's telling you something ain't right." Nora reached for the handkerchief, noticing how carefully he maintained the distance between them. "I've made a spectacle of myself. I can never show my face in this town again." "Red River's seen worse scandals," Wade said with a gentle smile. "Just last month, old Thompson's prize bull got loose and wandered into the Sunday service. Now that was a spectacle." Despite everything, Nora found herself smiling slightly. "You got somewhere to go?" he asked. Nora glanced down at her wedding dress, suddenly aware of how ridiculous she must look. "I have a room at Mrs. Hendrick's boarding house, but everyone will be looking for me there." Wade nodded thoughtfully. "I know a place you can catch your breath if you'd like. My sister Emma runs the millinery shop on Cedar Street. She's got rooms upstairs where you could hide out until things settle." Nora considered this stranger's unexpected kindness. "Why would you help me?" Wade adjusted his hat, looking toward the distant mountains. "Because sometimes folks need a helping hand, Miss Sullivan, no questions asked." "How do you know my name, small town?" he said with a shrug. "And that wedding's been the talk of Red River for weeks." A commotion rose from the direction of the church, voices calling her name, boots on the packed earth. "They're looking for me," she said, panic rising in her throat. Wade straightened up. "My horse is tied round front. I can take you to Emma's if you'd like. Or I can distract them while you make your own way, your choice entirely." Nora hesitated only a moment before making her decision. "Take me to your sister's, please. I need time to think." "All right, then." Wade moved toward the corner of the building but paused. "Miss Sullivan, I won't touch you." You seem like you don't want to be touched. I'll help you up on Rusty, but I'll be careful about it." Nora stared at him, wondering how this cowboy had seen what even her fiancé had failed to notice. "Thank you," she whispered. Wade led her to his chestnut gelding and fashioned a makeshift step from an empty crate. "Can you manage?" With some difficulty, Nora arranged her voluminous skirts and climbed onto the horse. Wade mounted behind her, careful to leave as much space between them as the saddle would allow. "I'll take the long way around," he said as they set off at a gentle trot. "Keep to the back streets." As they rode, Nora became acutely aware of Wade's presence, the scent of leather and pine, the careful way he held the reins to avoid brushing her hands, the solid warmth of him that somehow didn't feel threatening. For the first time in months, she felt a curious sensation: safety. The millinery shop was a tidy establishment with bright windows displaying fashionable hats and ribbons. Wade dismounted first and called through the open door, "Emma, got a situation here." A slender woman with Wade's same blue eyes appeared, taking in Nora's wedding dress with a single sweeping glance. Understanding dawned on her face. "Bring her round back," Emma said without hesitation. "And for heaven's sake, be discreet." Within minutes, Nora found herself in a cozy room above the shop, her wedding dress exchanged for a borrowed calico dress that hung loose on her frame. Emma had asked no questions, simply providing fresh water, clean clothes, and privacy. "My brother says you need a safe place," she'd said simply. "This room is yours for as long as you need it." Now, as the afternoon sun slanted through the curtained window, Nora sat on the edge of the narrow bed, wondering what would become of her. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Sullivan," Wade's voice came through the door. "Emma's sent up some tea and biscuits. I'll leave the tray outside your door." Nora heard his footsteps retreat before opening the door to find a neatly arranged tray. She brought it inside, noticing a folded note beneath the teacup. "Miss Sullivan, I'll be around if you need anything." "No need to explain what happened, that's your business. Just know that when you're ready to face the town again, you won't have to do it alone." WL. Nora traced the simple words with her fingertip, a single tear splashing onto the paper. It had been so long since someone had offered her help without demanding something in return. From the street below came the sounds of Red River coming to life after the excitement of the morning wagons rattling past, shopkeepers calling to customers, children laughing. Somewhere in that bustle was Harold, probably furious and humiliated. And beyond him were the townsfolk, already crafting the story of the bride who fled the altar. But in this quiet room above a millinery shop, with the simple kindness of strangers wrapping around her like a warm blanket, Nora Sullivan took her first full breath in months. The news of the failed wedding spread through Red River like wildfire. By evening, 3 different versions of the story circulated, one claiming Nora had received a telegram about a wealthy relative's death, another suggesting Harold had been caught with another woman, and the wildest insisting that Nora had been secretly married all along. None came close to the truth. For 3 days, Nora remained sequestered in Emma's spare room, venturing out only after dark to stretch her legs in the small garden behind the shop. Emma proved to be a blessing, bringing meals, offering spare clothes, and most importantly, asking no questions. On the 4th morning, as Nora helped Emma sort ribbons in the back room of the shop, the bell above the door jingled. "Good morning, Emma," came a familiar, deep voice. Nora froze, her fingers clutching a length of blue silk. "Morning, brother," Emma replied casually. What brings you to town on a Tuesday? Wade's boots scraped on the wooden floor. Needed some supplies. Thought I'd check in on our guest. Emma glanced at Nora, who nodded slightly. She's right here, Emma called, and doing just fine. Wade appeared in the doorway, hat in hand. His eyes found Nora's, and a small smile touched his lips. Miss Sullivan, good to see you up and about. Mr. Lancaster, she acknowledged, suddenly conscious of her borrowed dress and loosely pinned hair. An awkward silence fell, broken by Emma's exaggerated sigh. For heaven's sake, you two. Wade, there's coffee on the stove. Nora, why don't you take a break? I can finish these ribbons. Minutes later, Nora found herself sitting across from Wade at the small table in Emma's kitchen. He poured coffee for them both, sliding her cup carefully across the table without their fingers coming close to touching. I appreciate the discretion you and your sister have shown, Nora said formally. Wade nodded, studying her over the rim of his cup. Emma's good at keeping secrets. Lost her husband in the war, knows something about grief and needing space. Nora's eyes widened. I'm sorry to hear that. She's built a good life here, Wade said. Stronger than most men I know. He set his cup down, which is partly why I came by today. Wanted to let you know that things have settled some in town. What are they saying? Nora asked, dreading the answer. Well, Harold's telling folks you had an attack of nerves, said it happens to delicate women sometimes. Wade's expression suggested what he thought of this explanation. Most folks are pretending to believe him to be polite. And the others are too busy talking about the stagecoach robbery over in Cimarron to care much about a wedding that didn't happen. Relief washed over her. A robbery? Was anyone hurt? Just some mail bags taken. Point is, Miss Sullivan, the world's already moved on. Might be easier to face than you think. Nora traced the rim of her cup. I don't know if I can stay in Red River after this. Harold's an important man here. So where would you go? The question hung in the air. Nora had fled Boston with nearly all her savings, seeking the furthest place from the memories that haunted her. Red River had seemed perfect, small, remote, a place to disappear. Finding another such refuge wouldn't be easy. I don't know, she admitted. I was teaching piano lessons before the engagement. Perhaps I could do that elsewhere. Wade leaned back in his chair. Miss Peterson over at the schoolhouse has been looking for someone to teach music to the children. Mentioned it just last Sunday. Nora looked up sharply. Are you suggesting I stay? I'm suggesting you have options, Wade said carefully. Running's sometimes necessary, but it's no way to live forever. His words struck a chord. Nora had been running for so long from Boston, from memories, from herself. I'm afraid, she admitted, the words barely audible. Wade nodded slowly. Fear's nothing to be ashamed of. Shows you've got good sense. He reached across the table, not toward her but to push the sugar bowl closer. But facing fears, well, that takes courage. And you've got that too, Miss Sullivan. Saw it the moment you climbed on my horse in that wedding dress. A small laugh escaped her. I must have looked ridiculous. Determined, he corrected. You looked determined. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, catching the golden flecks in Wade's blue eyes. For the first time, Nora truly looked at him, the strong line of his jaw covered in reddish gold stubble, the crow's feet at the corners of his eyes, the quiet steadiness in his gaze. Mr. Lancaster, Wade, please. Wade, she amended. Why are you helping me, truly? He considered her question, turning his coffee cup slowly between calloused hands. 6 years ago, I came back from the war broken in ways folks couldn't see. Couldn't bear to be in crowds, couldn't sleep through the night. Emma stuck by me, never pushed, just waited until I found my way back. His eyes met hers. Sometimes people need time and space to heal. That's all I'm offering you. Nora felt tears prick her eyes at the simple truth of his words. Thank you, she whispered, Wade stood, settling his hat back on his head. "I'll talk to Miss Peterson if you'd like." "No pressure either way." "I'd appreciate that," Nora said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. At the kitchen door, Wade paused. "I'm heading back to the ranch, but I'll be in town again on Saturday. Maybe by then you'll be ready for a short walk, just down to the river and back." Fresh air does wonders. The prospect of leaving her sanctuary filled Nora with trepidation, but Wade's steady presence somehow made it seem possible. "Perhaps," she said. "I'll think about it." Wade tipped his hat. "That's all I ask. Good day, Miss Sullivan." After he left, Nora remained at the table, her coffee growing cold. For the first time since arriving in Red River, she allowed herself to consider a future here not as Harold Wilkins' wife, but as herself. Just Nora Sullivan, piano teacher, a woman rebuilding her life one careful step at a time. And perhaps, she thought with cautious hope, a woman who might someday learn to trust again. Saturday dawned clear and bright, the kind of early summer day that made Red River's harsh landscape seem almost welcoming. Nora stood before Emma's small mirror, pinning her dark hair into a simple chignon. She'd spent the morning helping in the shop, discovering that arranging hats and assisting customers brought unexpected satisfaction. Miss Peterson had sent a note expressing interest in piano lessons for her students, offering Nora a small salary that would allow her to rent a modest room. It wasn't the life she'd imagined when she agreed to marry Harold, but it was a chance to stand on her own. The bell above the shop door jangled. Nora's heart quickened as she heard Wade's distinctive voice greeting his sister. Taking a deep breath, she smoothed the borrowed blue dress, one of Emma's that had been hastily altered to fit her smaller frame, and descended the stairs. Wade stood hat in hand, wearing a clean shirt and his least worn denims. His eyes brightened when he saw her. "Miss Sullivan, you're looking well." "Thank you," she replied, conscious of Emma's knowing smile. "I thought perhaps that walk might be nice today." If Wade was surprised by her acceptance, he didn't show it. "The river's particularly pretty this time of year." Emma handed Nora a shawl and a small basket. "Take these biscuits I made. The fresh air will work up an appetite." Outside, the main street bustled with Saturday activity. Nora tensed as they emerged from the shop, but Wade positioned himself slightly ahead, creating a buffer between her and the curious glances of passers-by. "Miss Peterson was pleased about your interest in teaching," he said conversationally as they walked. "Said the children have been making do with just singing, but proper piano instruction would be a real boon." Nora focused on his words rather than the stares following them. "I'd need access to a piano for practice." "Church has one," Wade replied. "Reverend Michaels said you'd be welcome to use it weekday afternoons when the building's empty." Nora glanced at him, surprised. "You've been busy on my behalf." A slight flush colored his tanned cheeks. "Just making introductions. You'll do the real work." They turned down a side street that led away from town and toward the river that gave Red River its name. As the sounds of the town receded, Nora felt her shoulders relax. "Better?" Wade asked perceptively. "Yes," she admitted. "I wasn't ready for all those eyes." "Small towns have long memories but short attention spans," he said. "Give it time." The path narrowed as it approached the riverbank, forcing them to walk closer together. Wade naturally slowed his pace, allowing Nora to set the distance between them. The consideration in the gesture touched her deeply. The Red River flowed steadily, its waters glinting in the midday sun. Wade led her to a flat rock overlooking a quiet bend where cottonwood trees provided dappled shade. "My thinking spot," he explained, stepping back to let her settle. "Found it my first week working at the rocking J." Nora arranged her skirts and sat, breathing in the clean scent of flowing water and sun-warmed earth. It's peaceful here. Wade lowered himself to the ground several feet away, leaning against a tree trunk. That's why I like it. No demands, no expectations. Just the river doing what rivers do. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching a pair of hawks circle overhead. Nora unwrapped Emma's biscuits and offered one to Wade, who accepted with a nod of thanks. "May I ask you something personal?" Nora ventured after a time. "Seems fair," Wade replied. "I already know one of your secrets. What was it like coming back from the war? How did you start again?" Wade contemplated the flowing water, his expression thoughtful. "Hard," he said finally. "Harder than the fighting in some ways. War has rules, patterns. Coming home, everything looked the same but felt different." He broke a piece of biscuit between his fingers. "Or maybe I was the one who changed." "How did you adjust?" "Slowly," he said with a wry smile. "Started with small things, helping Emma in her garden, fixing things around her house. Then took the job at the Rocking J because horses don't ask questions or expect conversation." His eyes found hers. "Found that routine helps, and purpose." Nora nodded, understanding. "And the memories? Do they ever fade?" Wade's expression grew serious. "They change, lose some of their power." He studied her face carefully. "Nora, Miss Sullivan, whatever happened to you back east, it doesn't define who you are, just what you've survived." The simple truth of his words broke something loose inside her. "I was attacked," she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "Walking home from giving piano lessons, he dragged me into an alley and—" She wrapped her arms around herself. "I fought, but he was so strong. Afterward, I couldn't bear to stay in Boston. Every shadow, every man's voice." Wade remained perfectly still, his face a mask of controlled anger. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "No one should endure such a thing." "I thought I could leave it behind," Nora continued, the words a torrent now. "When Harold proposed after just a few weeks of courtship, I convinced myself it was a blessing, that marriage would somehow fix me." She looked down at her hands. "But at the altar, when he reached for me, all I could feel were those other hands." "You don't need fixing, Nora," Wade said quietly. "You need healing. There's a difference." The distinction struck her like a physical force. All this time she'd seen herself as broken, damaged. But Wade's words offered another perspective, one that allowed for recovery, for growth. "I don't know how," she whispered. "Neither do I," Wade admitted. "But I know it takes time, and that forcing it only makes it worse." A bird called from a nearby tree, its song clear and sweet in the afternoon air. Nora breathed deeply, feeling something shift within her, not healing exactly, but perhaps the beginning of acceptance. "I want to stay in Red River," she said suddenly. "Build something new." Wade's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "Then you will. People will talk." "Let them," he said with a shrug. "Most folks around here are decent at heart. They just need time to adjust their thinking." As if to punctuate his words, the sound of approaching voices drifted from the path, children's laughter and a woman calling after them. Nora tensed instinctively. "We can leave if you'd prefer," Wade offered. Nora considered, then shook her head. "No, I can't hide forever." Moments later, Mrs. Baker appeared with her 3 children, who were racing ahead to the water's edge. She pulled up short when she spotted them, surprise evident on her face. "Miss Sullivan," she said, recovering quickly. "Mr. Lancaster, fine day for a riverside picnic." Wade tipped his hat. "Afternoon, Mrs. Baker." An awkward silence followed as the woman clearly tried to reconcile the scandalous runaway bride with the composed woman before her. "I hear you might be teaching piano at the school," Mrs. Baker ventured finally. "My Abigail has always wanted to learn." Nora straightened her shoulders. "Yes, I'm speaking with Miss Peterson about arrangements. The classes would begin after the harvest." "Well," Mrs. Baker said with a decisive nod. "That's good news indeed. This town could use more culture." She hesitated, then added kindly, "It's nice to see you out and about, Miss Sullivan. Red River's a forgiving place by and large." As Mrs. Baker moved away to supervise her children, Nora released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Wade's eyes held a quiet approval. "First hurdle cleared," he said. "One of many, I suspect. One day at a time," Wade reminded her. "That's all anyone can manage." They remained by the river as the afternoon lengthened, talking easily about inconsequential things: the weather, Emma's shop, the quirks of Red River's inhabitants. Nora found herself laughing at Wade's dry observations, the sound surprising her with its unfamiliarity. How long had it been since she'd truly laughed? When they finally walked back toward town, the shadows were lengthening, casting the main street in golden light. Wade again positioned himself slightly ahead, his presence a shield against curious looks. But Nora noticed that the stares were fewer, the whispers less obvious. Mrs. Baker had likely spread word of their encounter, normalizing Nora's presence in the town's collective mind. At Emma's door they paused. "Thank you for today," Nora said sincerely. "I didn't realize how much I needed to be outside again." "My pleasure," Wade replied. "I ride into town most Saturdays. Perhaps next week we could walk again if you'd like." Nora found herself nodding without hesitation. "I'd like that very much." Wade tipped his hat, a smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Until then, Miss Sullivan." She watched him stride away, his tall figure cutting a distinctive silhouette against the setting sun. For the first time since arriving in Red River, Nora felt something like hope take root in her heart, fragile but undeniably real. The weeks that followed took on a rhythm that brought Nora unexpected comfort. Mornings were spent helping Emma in the millinery shop, learning the business of ribbons, feathers, and the careful art of listening to customers' desires. Afternoons she practiced at the church piano, reacquainting her fingers with the melodies that had once been her livelihood. And Saturdays belonged to Wade. Their walks expanded from the river to encompass the meadows beyond town, the small lake to the east, and once even up to the ridge that overlooked the valley. Wade kept a careful distance always, attentive to Nora's comfort without making her feel self-conscious about it. They talked easily, discovering shared interests in books and nature. Wade, she learned, had a surprising knowledge of poetry, quoting Wordsworth and Whitman with casual accuracy. Nora shared stories of her childhood in Vermont, of the piano teacher who had recognized her talent and sponsored her education at a Boston music academy. Some topics remained untouched: the war for Wade, the attack for Nora, but their silent agreement to respect these boundaries only strengthened the trust growing between them. July brought sweltering heat that drove most of Red River's inhabitants indoors during the afternoon hours. On one such scorching Saturday, Wade suggested they forego their usual walk. "Thought you might like to see the ranch instead," he said, standing in Emma's kitchen with his hat in his hands. "It's cooler up in the hills, and the main house has a decent piano that hasn't been played in years." The invitation represented a significant step, moving beyond the neutral territory of their walks into the private realm of Wade's daily life. Nora hesitated only briefly before nodding. "I'd like that," she said. "Though I'm not much of a rider." Wade's eyes crinkled. "Rusty's gentle as they come. And I thought we might take the wagon, more comfortable in this heat." An hour later, they were traveling the dusty road leading away from Red River in the ranch's buckboard wagon. Wade handled the team with practiced ease, keeping a slow pace that allowed conversation. "How long have you worked at the Rocking J?" Nora asked, enjoying the breeze created by their movement. "Going on 5 years now," Wade replied. Started as a regular hand, worked my way up to foreman last spring when old Jim retired. You must enjoy it, most days, he said with a smile. There's satisfaction in honest work. And Mr. Johansen's, a fair boss, lets me run things my way mostly. The road climbed steadily, winding through pine-covered hills that offered occasional glimpses of the valley below. Red River dwindled to a collection of toy-like buildings, the church steeple a white point against the landscape. It's beautiful, Nora breathed. Worth the dust, Wade agreed. The Rocking J Ranch appeared gradually, first the split rail fences enclosing grazing land, then outbuildings scattered across the property, and finally the main house itself, a substantial two-story structure of locally quarried stone and heavy timber. Mr. Johansen built it 15 years ago, Wade explained as they approached. Wanted something that would last generations. His son runs the business end of things from Santa Fe nowadays, but the old man still considers this home. As Wade helped her down from the wagon, offering his forearm rather than his hand in a gesture that touched Nora deeply, a gray-haired man emerged from the house. "Lancaster, didn't expect you back so early," he called, then noticed Nora. "Ah, company. Welcome to Rocking J, madam." Wade performed introductions, his manner respectful but comfortable. "Mr. Johansen, this is Miss Nora Sullivan. Miss Sullivan, Anders Johansen, the man who signs my pay vouchers." The ranch owner chuckled, extending a weather-beaten hand before catching himself and offering a small bow instead. "Pleasure to meet you, Miss Sullivan. Lancaster mentioned you're a piano teacher." "Yes, sir," Nora replied, grateful for his tact. "I'll be teaching at the school come fall." "Well then, you must try our piano," Johansen said enthusiastically. "Been silent since my Eliza passed. Shame to let a fine instrument gather dust." Inside, the ranch house revealed unexpected elegance: polished wood floors, substantial furniture, and walls adorned with landscape paintings. The piano occupied a place of honor in the main sitting room, its dark wood gleaming in the sunlight from tall windows. Nora approached it reverently, running a fingertip along its edge. "Baldwin upright," she murmured. "A beautiful instrument." "Eliza insisted on the best," Johansen said with fond remembrance. "Had it shipped all the way from Cincinnati. Would you play something? Been too long since these walls heard music." Nora glanced at Wade, who nodded encouragement. She settled on the bench, testing the keys to find them surprisingly well-tuned. After a moment's consideration, she began a Chopin nocturne, one of her favorites for its gentle melancholy. The music filled the room, wrapping around the three listeners like something tangible. Nora lost herself in the familiar patterns, her fingers remembering what her mind had nearly forgotten: the pure joy of creation, of bringing beauty into being. When the final notes faded, she looked up to find both men watching her with identical expressions of wonder. "My dear," Johansen said, his voice rough with emotion, "that was exquisite." "Thank you," Nora replied softly. "Your piano is a joy to play." "You must come again," the older man declared. "Use it whenever you wish. Music shouldn't be bottled up." After Johansen excused himself to attend to ranch business, Wade showed Nora around the property: the stables with their fine horses, the bunkhouse where he had a small private room as foreman, the kitchen garden tended by the ranch cook. They ended their tour at a small creek that ran along the property's eastern edge. Cottonwoods provided welcome shade as they settled on a fallen log. "Mr. Johansen seems a good man," Nora observed. "The best," Wade agreed. "Gave me a chance when many wouldn't hire a veteran with night terrors. Said he'd rather have a man who understood the value of peace." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the gurgle of the creek. Nora found herself studying Wade's profile, the straight nose, firm jaw, and surprising gentleness of his mouth. Something warm unfurled in her chest, a feeling she'd almost forgotten existed. "Wade," she said suddenly, "would you mind if— that is, I'd like to try something." He turned to her, eyebrows raised in question. Nora took a deep breath. "Would you hold out your hand, just flat on your knee?" Understanding dawned in his eyes. Without a word, he extended his right hand, palm up, and rested it on his knee close enough that she could reach it, far enough that she didn't feel crowded. Nora stared at his hand, broad, calloused from ranch work, steady as the man himself. Slowly, holding her breath, she extended her own hand until her fingertips hovered just above his palm. "Take your time," Wade murmured. "No rush." With deliberate care, Nora lowered her fingers until they brushed his palm. The contact sent a jolt through her, not entirely unpleasant but intense. She resisted the urge to pull away, instead letting her fingertips rest lightly against his skin. Wade remained perfectly still, his breathing measured. His eyes, when she dared to meet them, held no expectation, no demand, only steady support. After a moment, Nora withdrew her hand, releasing a shaky breath. Thank you," Wade countered softly, "for trusting me." The simple exchange shifted something fundamental between them. On the ride back to town, Nora felt lighter somehow, as if she'd set down a burden she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. At Emma's door, Wade tipped his hat in his usual farewell. "Saturday next," Nora smiled, a full, genuine expression that reached her eyes. "I look forward to it." As summer ripened into early autumn, Nora's life in Red River took on a fullness she hadn't thought possible. She secured a small room at the back of Mrs. Hendrick's boarding house, a private space with a window that caught the morning sun. The piano lessons at the school proved popular, with 12 students ranging from 8 to 16 years of age. Most surprising was her reception in town. What had begun as whispers and sidelong glances transformed gradually into nods of greeting and casual conversations. Harold Wilkins had departed for Denver on bank business shortly after the failed wedding and showed no signs of returning, which simplified matters considerably. Emma insisted on hosting a small gathering to celebrate Nora's first month of teaching. "Just a few friends," she promised. "People you should know if you're staying in Red River." Nora agreed with only mild trepidation. The thought of socializing still provoked anxiety, but she was learning to manage it, especially knowing Wade would be there. The evening arrived clear and cool, with the first hint of autumn crispness in the air. Emma transformed the rooms above her shop with lanterns and vases of late summer wildflowers. The guest list was indeed small. Miss Peterson from the school, Reverend Michaels and his wife, Dr. and Mrs. Collins, and Mr. Johansen, who had ridden in from the ranch specifically for the occasion. Wade arrived last, having stayed to oversee the evening feeding of the livestock. He cleaned up impressively. Nora thought his usually wind-tousled hair neatly combed, his Sunday shirt crisp against the tan of his neck. "You look lovely," he said quietly as he hung his hat by the door. Nora smoothed the skirt of her new dress, a gift from Emma, fashioned from cornflower blue fabric that complemented her dark hair. "Thank you. I'm a bit nervous." "No need," he assured her. "These are good people, and they're here because they admire you." The gathering proved more enjoyable than Nora had anticipated. The conversation flowed easily, focusing on town matters, the upcoming harvest festival, and entertaining stories of Red River's early days that Mr. Johansen was happy to provide. After dinner, at the group's insistence, Nora played the small upright piano Emma had acquired for the occasion. She chose cheerful, familiar pieces that soon had everyone singing along, the simple joy of shared music filling the room with warmth. Later, as guests began to depart, Nora found herself beside Wade on Emma's small balcony. The night air carried the scent of pine and wood smoke, and stars crowded the vast New Mexico sky. "Thank you for coming," she said. "It helped knowing you were here." Wade leaned against the railing, his shoulder close to hers but not touching. "Wouldn't have missed it. You've built something good here, Nora, in just a few months." The use of her first name, rare but becoming more frequent, sent a pleasant warmth through her. "I've had help," she said, glancing at him. "Quite a lot of it, actually. You did the hard part," he countered. "Choosing to stay, choosing to trust again." Inside, Emma laughed at something Reverend Michaels said, the sound drifting through the open window. Nora studied Wade's profile in the lantern light, finding it increasingly dear to her. "Wade," she said softly, "I'd like to try something else, if you're willing." He turned to face her, curiosity in his eyes. "Of course." Nora stepped closer, her heart pounding. "Would you? Would you hold my hand? Properly, I mean." Wade's expression softened. "Are you sure?" She nodded, extending her hand slightly. "I'm sure." With infinite gentleness, Wade took her hand in his calloused fingers curling around hers with the lightest pressure. The contact sent a tremor through Nora, but this time it was overlaid with something else, a spark of warmth, of connection. They stood that way for several heartbeats, hands joined beneath the stars, the simplest of touches bridging worlds of experience between them. "All right?" Wade asked quietly. "Yes," Nora whispered, surprised to find it true. "All right." September brought the harvest, and with it, Red River's annual Harvest Festival, 3 days of celebration marking the end of the growing season. Normally, Nora would have avoided such a crowded event, but her students were performing a short musical program on the second day, and her presence was required. "You'll do splendidly," Emma assured her as they walked toward the town square on Saturday morning. The area had been transformed with bunting, stalls selling everything from jams to handcrafted goods, and a central space cleared for dancing. "It's not my performance I'm worried about," Nora admitted. "It's being in the middle of so many people." Emma patted her arm sympathetically. "Wade said he'd meet us by the lemonade stand, and you can always slip away to the church if it becomes too much." The mention of Wade brought a smile to Nora's face. Over the past weeks, their friendship had deepened into something neither of them had yet named but both clearly cherished. Their Saturday walks continued, now frequently including moments of careful physical contact, handed joined while crossing a stream, a steadying touch on the elbow when navigating rough terrain. Each touch became easier, each contact a small victory against the shadows of her past. The festival was indeed crowded, but Nora found the cheerful atmosphere infectious. Children darted between stalls, their laughter rising above the general hubbub. Women compared preserves and needlework, entered in various contests. Men gathered around displays of livestock, debating the merits of different breeds with good-natured intensity. Wade found them as promised, his tall figure easy to spot in the crowd. "Ladies," he greeted them, touching the brim of his hat. "Quite a turnout this year." "Red River loves its traditions," Emma replied. "You should see it tonight when the dancing starts." Wade's eyes found Nora's. "Speaking of which, I was wondering if you might save me a dance this evening. Nothing complicated, just a simple waltz." The request caught Nora by surprise. Dancing meant prolonged contact, proximity to others, everything that still triggered her anxiety. Yet looking at Wade, at the hope in his eyes carefully tempered with acceptance of her possible refusal, she found herself considering it. "I haven't danced in a very long time," she hedged. It's like riding, Wade said. You never really forget. Emma, sensing the importance of the moment, tactfully excused herself to examine a nearby quilt display. Nora took a deep breath. "One dance," she said finally. "A waltz, as you suggested." The smile that broke across Wade's face was worth any discomfort the evening might bring. "I'll hold you to that," he said. "And Nora, we can stop any time you need to. Just say the word." The afternoon passed in a blur of activity. Nora's students performed admirably. Their simple rendition of America the Beautiful earning enthusiastic applause from the assembled townsfolk. Afterward, she found herself surrounded by proud parents expressing gratitude for her teaching. "You've brought music back to Red River, Mrs. Baker declared, echoing the sentiment of many. "Such a gift for our children." As twilight approached, lanterns were lit around the square and the local fiddle band set up on a makeshift stage. Tables groaned under the weight of potluck dishes contributed by every household. The atmosphere turned festive as stars emerged in the darkening sky. Wade found Nora sitting at the edge of the gathering, watching the dancers with a mixture of apprehension and longing. "Our piano teacher looks like she could use some refreshment," he said, offering a cup of lemonade. Nora accepted gratefully. "Thank you, it's been a rather overwhelming day." "In a good way, I hope," she nodded, sipping the cool drink. "The children were wonderful, and people have been very kind." "Told you they would be," Wade said, settling beside her with a respectable space between them. Red River folks just needed time to know the real Nora Sullivan. They sat in comfortable silence as the fiddle band struck up a lively reel. Couples took to the cleared area, skirts swirling and boots stomping in time to the music. The simple joy of the scene touched Nora deeply. "When I first came to Red River," she said softly, "I never imagined I could be part of something like this." Wade's eyes held understanding. "Sometimes life surprises us in the best ways." The music shifted to a slower tempo, the familiar strains of a waltz rising into the night air. Wade stood and extended his hand. "May I have this dance, Miss Sullivan?" Nora stared at his offered hand, her heart racing. This was different from their private moments by the creek or on their walks. This was public, with dozens of eyes potentially watching. "We can wait for the next one," Wade offered, reading her hesitation. "Or simply continue sitting. It's your choice, Nora, always." His words, so simple yet profound, steadied her. With a deep breath, Nora placed her hand in his. "This one is perfect, Mr. Lancaster." Wade led her to the edge of the dancing area, positioning himself so that his broad back shielded her somewhat from the crowd. With careful movements, he placed his right hand lightly at her waist, holding their joined hands at shoulder height. "Ready?" he murmured. Nora nodded, unable to speak through the tightness in her throat. Wade began to lead, his movements gentle and predictable, giving her time to remember the steps. The initial contact made her tense, but as they continued, moving in small circles away from the other dancers, Nora gradually relaxed into the rhythm. "You're doing wonderfully," Wade said softly. "You're a surprisingly good dancer for a cowboy," she replied, finding her voice. His eyes crinkled. "My mother's insistence said no son of hers would clod around a dance floor like a bear with sore paws." The mental image made Nora laugh, the sound rising clear above the music. Several nearby dancers glanced their way, smiling at the evident joy on her face. "I like hearing you laugh," Wade said, his voice low and warm. "Suits you." As they continued to waltz, Nora became aware of subtle changes, how Wade gradually drew her a fraction closer, how her hand relaxed in his, how the contact at her waist no longer felt threatening but supportive. By the time the music ended, they were dancing properly, moving in harmony as if they'd done so for years. Wade released her reluctantly when the final notes faded. "Thank you for the dance, Nora." "Thank you for asking," she replied, her cheeks flushed with exertion and something deeper. Later, walking back to Mrs. Hendrick's boarding house under a canopy of stars, Wade offered Nora his arm. Without hesitation, she slipped her hand into the crook of his elbow, the contact now familiar and comforting. "Would you like to ride out to the ranch again next Saturday?" he asked. "Mr. Johansson mentioned you're welcome anytime. Says the piano misses you." "I'd like that very much," Nora replied. At the boarding house steps they paused. The moment hung between them, weighted with possibility. "Nora," Wade began, his voice unusually hesitant, "I hope you know how much that is, how much I value our friendship." "As do I," she said softly. "The thing is," he continued, "my feelings have grown beyond friendship, but I want you to know that doesn't change anything about my promises. I'll still wait, for as long as you need, even if that's forever." The simple declaration stole Nora's breath. In the months since their first meeting behind the general store, Wade had become essential to her in ways she'd never anticipated, his steadiness a foundation she could build upon, his patience a gift she treasured daily. "Wade," she whispered, "I'm not ready for everything. But I'm not asking you to wait forever." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "You mean?" "I mean that I care for you too," Nora said, the words freeing something long trapped inside her, "and that I'm healing day by day, because of you in many ways." Wade's smile was slow and radiant in the starlight. "That's all I need to know." Acting on impulse, Nora leaned forward and pressed the lightest of kisses to his cheek, the barest brush of contact, yet monumental in significance. "Good night, Wade," she whispered. "Good night, Nora," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "Sweet dreams." As autumn deepened toward winter, Nora's life in Red River assumed a richness she couldn't have imagined that spring day when she fled the church. Her piano students progressed admirably. Her friendship with Emma deepened into sisterly affection, and her standing in the community solidified as townspeople came to know her as the dedicated music teacher rather than the runaway bride. But it was her relationship with Wade that brought the most profound changes. Their Saturday outings continued, now frequently including visits to the Rocking J, where Nora would play the magnificent piano while Wade and Mr. Johansson listened appreciatively. Afterward, they would walk the ranch's extensive grounds, talking easily about everything and nothing. The physical boundaries between them shifted gradually. Hand-holding became commonplace, a comfort rather than a challenge. Wade learned to telegraph his movements, to never approach from behind, to offer contact rather than initiating it. And Nora learned to trust again not just Wade, but herself. To recognize that her body's reactions came from past trauma, not present danger. That healing wasn't linear but a series of advances and occasional retreats. The first snowfall came in late November, transforming Red River into a winter wonderland. Nora stood at her boarding house window, watching fat flakes drift past the glass, when Mrs. Hendricks knocked at her door. "Mr. Lancaster is downstairs," the landlady announced with poorly disguised interest. "Says he has something important to discuss." Nora found Wade in the small parlor, hat in hands, snow melting on his shoulders. His expression was uncharacteristically serious. "Is something wrong?" she asked, immediately concerned. "No," he assured her quickly. "Nothing wrong, but I received a telegram this morning that I wanted to discuss with you." They sat on the parlor sofa, close enough that their knees nearly touched. Wade pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "It's from a rancher named Davidson, over in Colorado. He's looking for an experienced foreman to manage his operation larger than the Rocking J, with better pay and a house included." Nora felt her heart constrict. "You're leaving?" Wade's eyes found hers. "That depends entirely on you, Nora." "I don't understand." With careful movements, Wade took her hands in his. "I've been saving for years, putting aside as much as I could from my wages. This position would mean financial security, a real future." He paused, his thumbs tracing gentle circles on her wrists. "A future I'd like to share with you if you're willing." Nora's breath caught as she understood his meaning. "Wade, are you?" "I'm asking if you'd consider becoming my wife," he said simply. "Not right away. We could have a long engagement, a year, even longer if you need." "I meant what I said about waiting until you're ready." His blue eyes held hers steadily. "I love you, Nora Sullivan. I think I have since I found you behind that general store." The declaration washed over her like warm sunlight. Nora had known for some time that her feelings for Wade ran deep, but hearing his profession of love crystallized something within her. "The position," she said, finding her voice. "When would you need to leave?" "After the new year." "But I've already told Mr. Davidson I won't accept without my fiancé's approval." Wade's expression grew serious. "I wouldn't ask you to leave Red River if you're not ready. You've built a life here." Nora considered his words carefully. Red River had indeed become home in many ways, the first place since Boston, where she'd felt truly settled. Yet she realized with sudden clarity that her attachment wasn't to the town itself, but to the sense of belonging she'd found there. A sense she now carried within herself, portable as her music. "I would miss my students," she admitted. "And Emma." "Davidson's ranch is near a growing town," Wade said. "They have a school that would likely welcome a piano teacher, and Emma could visit. It's only a 2-day journey." Nora looked down at their joined hands, her smaller ones nestled within his larger, calloused ones. Hands that had never pushed, never grabbed, never demanded. Hands that had shown her what true protection felt like. "Yes," she said, raising her eyes to his. "Yes, I'll marry you, Wade Lancaster." The joy that transformed his face was breathtaking. "Truly," Nora nodded, feeling suddenly, completely certain. "But you're right about a long engagement I'm not ready for. Everything that marriage entails." Understanding softened Wade's expression. "We'll take it one day at a time, as we always have. Nothing will happen that you don't want or aren't ready for. That's a promise." "I know," Nora said softly. "That's why I can say yes." Wade raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Might I kiss you properly?" "Just once to seal our engagement." The request sent a flutter of both anticipation and apprehension through Nora. She'd imagined this moment, had even rehearsed it in her mind, but the reality was suddenly immediate and overwhelming. "Yes," she whispered, "but slowly." Wade nodded, moving with deliberate care. He released her hands to cup her face gently, his touch as light as falling snow. "Tell me if you need me to stop," he murmured. Nora closed her eyes as he leaned forward, feeling his breath warm against her lips. The first contact was whisper soft, barely there, giving her time to adjust. Then slightly firmer, a proper kiss but still achingly tender. Her hands found their way to his shoulders, steadying herself as unexpected warmth spread through her. When Wade pulled back slightly, his eyes searching hers, Nora realized something profound had shifted inside her. The kiss had awakened not fear but desire, faint and new but undeniably present. "All right?" he asked, his voice husky. "More than all right," she assured him, marveling at the truth of it. They spent the snowy afternoon planning their future, the move to Colorado, the timing of their wedding, the life they would build together. Wade insisted they visit the ranch before making any final decisions, wanting Nora to approve of what would become their home. "We could go after Christmas," he suggested. "Make sure you like the place before I accept officially." As dusk fell, turning the snow-covered streets to silver in the gathering darkness. Wade reluctantly prepared to leave. The storm had intensified, and he needed to return to the ranch before the roads became impassable. At the door, he kissed her once more, still gentle but with growing confidence. "I'll see you Saturday, weather permitting." Nora watched from the window as he mounted Rusty and rode away, his figure gradually disappearing into the swirling snow. A strange peace settled over her, a certainty that had been years in the making. That night, for the first time since the attack, Nora slept without nightmares. Christmas in Red River proved especially festive that year. The town, blanketed in pristine snow, took on a fairy-tale quality that delighted residents and visitors alike. Evergreen boughs decorated storefronts, and candles glowed in windows against the early winter darkness. News of Nora and Wade's engagement spread quickly, met with genuine congratulations from most quarters. If a few eyebrows raised at the thought of the runaway bride finding love again so soon, such whispers were quickly silenced by Emma's fierce defense and Mr. Johansen's hearty approval. "Never seen the boy happier," the old rancher declared at the church Christmas social. "Miss Sullivan's the best thing that could have happened to him." The day after Christmas, Wade arrived at the boarding house with the ranch's sleigh, ready to take Nora on the journey to Colorado. Mr. Johansen had insisted they use it, along with his finest team of horses. "A proper way to introduce your bride to be to her new home," he'd said with a wink. The journey would take 2 days, with an overnight stay at a way station halfway between Red River and Davidson's ranch. Nora had packed carefully, including the blue dress from the Harvest Festival and the sheet music for her favorite pieces to play for the Davidson family. Emma came to see them off, pressing a package into Nora's hands. "A wedding gift," she explained. "Though I expect you'll want to wait to open it." The knowing look in her eyes made Nora blush. The past weeks had seen gradual but significant progress in her physical relationship with Wade. Their kisses had deepened, their embraces lingered longer. Though certain boundaries remained firmly in place, Nora found herself increasingly able to imagine a true marriage in all its aspects. The journey passed pleasantly despite the cold. The sleigh, well supplied with blankets and heated bricks for their feet, carried them through spectacular winter landscapes, snow-covered mountains, vast white plains, forests of pine and aspen glittering with frost. They talked easily as they traveled, making plans and sharing hopes for their future. Wade spoke of his desire to eventually have his own small ranch, something manageable that they could build together. Nora described the music room she dreamed of creating, a space where she could teach and compose. "You compose music?" Wade asked, clearly impressed. "I used to," Nora admitted. "Simple pieces mostly. I haven't tried in years, but lately I've felt the inspiration returning." Wade's smile was warm with pride. "I'd like to hear your compositions someday." "You will be my first audience," she promised. They reached the way station as darkness fell, a sturdy building that offered basic but clean accommodation for travelers. The elderly couple who ran the establishment provided a hot meal and separate rooms, Wade insisting on propriety, despite their engaged status. The next morning dawned clear and bracingly cold. After a hearty breakfast, they continued their journey, the horses making good time on the well-packed snow. By mid-afternoon, Wade pointed to a distant collection of buildings nestled in a sheltered valley. "Davidson Ranch," he announced. "What do you think of the location?" Nora studied the scene with growing approval. The ranch occupied a beautiful spot protected from the worst winter winds by surrounding hills, with a creek running through the property and ample grazing land stretching toward distant mountains. "It looks peaceful," she said. "Secluded but not isolated." Wade nodded, clearly relieved by her positive reaction. Town's about 5 miles east, small but growing. Has a church, school, even a hotel with a decent restaurant. As they approached, details emerged: a sprawling main house of solid construction, well-maintained outbuildings, fenced paddocks containing impressive horses. A man emerged from the barn, raising a hand in greeting as they drew closer. "That's Robert Davidson," Wade said. "Good man by all accounts. Inherited the ranch from his father, but expanded it considerably." Davidson proved to be a hearty, straightforward man in his 50s with a firm handshake and direct manner. His wife, Martha, a pleasant woman with kind eyes, welcomed Nora warmly. "We've been hoping Wade would accept the position," she confided as she showed Nora around the main house. "Our previous foreman retired in October, and we've been struggling to manage everything ourselves." The house impressed Nora with its solid comfort. Not ostentatious but well appointed, with good furniture and signs of a woman's touch in the curtains and cushions. Martha proudly displayed the piano in the front parlor, a modest instrument but well maintained. "I don't play myself," she admitted, "but I so love music. It would be wonderful to hear this old thing brought to life again." Most impressive was the foreman's house, a separate structure a short distance from the main residence. Though smaller, it offered everything a young couple might need. 2 bedrooms, a functional kitchen, a comfortable sitting area with a stone fireplace, and a covered porch facing the mountains. "Robert built it 5 years ago," Martha explained. "Said a good foreman deserves his own home, especially if he has family." The words sent a pleasant warmth through Nora as she imagined making this space her own: curtains at the windows, books on the shelves, perhaps eventually a child's cradle in the second bedroom. After a tour of the entire property and an excellent dinner, Robert Davidson officially offered Wade the position. "Foreman with full authority over ranch operations," he stated. "Monthly salary plus year-end bonus based on profits. House included, along with basic provisions." And he added with a glance at Nora, "We'd be pleased to introduce Mrs. Lancaster to the school board in town. They've been wanting to start music lessons for some time." Wade looked to Nora, making it clear the decision was shared. She nodded slightly, her heart full at his consideration. "We accept," Wade said, extending his hand to Davidson. "We can move after the wedding in March if that suits." "Perfectly," Davidson agreed. "And you're both welcome to stay a few days now if you'd like to get better acquainted with the property." That night, in the guest room Martha had prepared for her, Nora sat by the window watching moonlight transform the snowy landscape into a silver dreamscape. The future stretched before her, not without challenges, but full of promise. A home, meaningful work, a community that would eventually become familiar, and most importantly, a husband who understood the true meaning of patience. A soft knock at her door roused her from her reflections. "Nora, are you still awake?" Wade's voice came softly through the wood. She opened the door to find him standing in the hallway, looking somewhat hesitant. "I wanted to be sure you're truly comfortable with all this," he said quietly. "It's not too late to change your mind if the ranch doesn't suit you." Nora reached out, taking his hand in hers. "It's perfect, Wade. I can imagine our life here very clearly." Relief softened his features. "So can I." They stood in comfortable silence, hands joined in the moonlit hallway, until Nora made a decision that surprised even herself. Rising on tiptoe, she kissed him, not the gentle, exploratory kisses they'd shared before, but something deeper, an invitation and a promise. Wade responded carefully at first, then with growing passion as he sensed her willingness. His arms encircled her, drawing her closer but not confining, always leaving space for retreat if needed. But Nora found she didn't want to retreat. The warmth of his embrace, the tenderness of his touch awakened something long dormant within her desire unclouded by fear. When they finally broke apart, both breathing quickly, Wade rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Nora Sullivan, more than I have words to express. And I love you," she whispered, the declaration feeling like coming home. "Thank you for waiting." His smile was tender in the dimness. "I'd wait a lifetime if needed, but I'm mighty glad I won't have to." They returned to Red River the following day to prepare for their March wedding and the subsequent move. The winter passed in a flurry of preparations, with Emma insisting on creating the perfect wedding dress. "Nothing elaborate," she promised. "Simple and elegant like you." Nora continued her piano lessons, arranging for Miss Peterson to take over her students after her departure. She began composing again, small pieces inspired by her experiences in Red River and her growing love for Wade. Their wedding took place on a bright March morning in the same church Nora had fled 10 months earlier. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, but this time there was no hesitation, no fear as she walked down the aisle toward Wade. Reverend Michaels kept the ceremony simple at their request. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Wade asked softly, "May I kiss my bride?" Nora's smile was radiant as she nodded, accepting his kiss with a joy that sent ripples of approval through the assembled guests. The reception at Emma's shop allowed the entire town to wish them well. Even Harold Wilkins, recently returned from Denver, stopped briefly to offer congratulations, his manner stiff but civil. As evening approached, Wade led Nora to the waiting wagon that would take them to the Rocking J for their wedding night. Mr. Johansen had insisted they spend their first night as husband and wife in the ranch's guest room before beginning their journey to Colorado the following day. "It's tradition," the old man had declared. "Besides, gives you youngsters some privacy." The ride to the ranch passed in comfortable silence, Nora's hand nestled in Wade's, her head occasionally resting against his shoulder. The setting sun painted the landscape in hues of gold and pink, a fitting end to a perfect day. At the ranch, Emma's wedding gift waited on the turned-down bed, a nightgown of finest cotton, simple yet beautiful with delicate embroidery at the neckline. Wade excused himself to check on their travel arrangements for the morning, giving Nora time to prepare for the night ahead. When he returned, he found her sitting by the window, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, Emma's gift flowing softly around her slender form. She turned at his entrance, her expression a mixture of anticipation and lingering apprehension. Wade crossed to her slowly, kneeling beside her chair. "Nora," he said gently, "tonight changes nothing about my promises. We'll go as slowly as you need. We can just sleep if that's what you want." Nora touched his cheek, overwhelmed by the tenderness of this man who had taught her to trust again. "I want to try," she whispered. "With you, I'm not afraid. If anything feels wrong, you'll tell me, I promise." Wade rose, offering his hand. When she took it, he led her to the bed, sitting beside her with careful space between them. "May I kiss you, Mrs. Lancaster?" The new name sent a thrill through her. "You may." Their kiss began softly but deepened as Nora wound her arms around his neck, drawing him closer. Wade's hands remained respectfully at her waist, though she could feel the restraint it cost him. Gradually, as the night deepened around them, Nora guided his hands to places they hadn't ventured before. Each touch was a question, each response an answer as they learned the language of each other's bodies. Wade's patience never wavered, his focus entirely on her comfort and pleasure. When moments of panic briefly surfaced, a position too confining, a memory too vivid, Wade immediately shifted, murmuring reassurances until the fear subsided. His unwavering respect transformed what could have been traumatic into something healing. even sacred. Later, as they lay entwined in the moonlight filtering through the curtains, Nora rested her head on Wade's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. "Thank you," she whispered. Wade's arms tightened gently around her. "For what, my love? For waiting, for understanding, for showing me that love and touch can be beautiful again." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Thank you for trusting me with your heart." As sleep began to claim her, Nora reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment, from terror to healing, from isolation to connection, from fleeing an altar to finding true love with a patient cowboy who had simply promised to wait until she was ready. And now, in the circle of his arms, Nora Sullivan Lancaster knew with absolute certainty she was ready for whatever their future might hold, as long as they faced it together. 5 years later, the foreman's house on the Davidson Ranch had transformed from a simple dwelling to a true home. Curtains that Nora had sewn herself adorned the windows. Bookshelves Wade had built lined the walls of the sitting room, and the second bedroom had indeed come to hold a cradle currently occupied by 3-month-old William Robert Lancaster, named for Wade's father and their employer turned friend. The ranch prospered under Wade's management, allowing them to save toward their dream of a small property of their own. Nora had established herself as the town's piano teacher, with students coming 3 days a week to the small music room Davidson had added to their house as a wedding anniversary gift. Most precious of all, Nora had found complete healing in Wade's patient love. The nightmares came rarely now, and when they did, Wade's gentle presence brought her back to safety and peace. Their physical relationship had blossomed into something neither could have imagined that day behind the general store in Red River, passionate yet tender, equal in giving and receiving comfort. On a bright summer evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains, William sleeping contentedly in Nora's arms, Wade reached for his wife's free hand. "Happy?" he asked simply. Nora smiled, the expression reaching her eyes in a way that still captivated him. "Completely," she replied. "Are you?" "More than I ever thought possible." He gently stroked his son's downy head. "Who would have thought that day in Red River would lead to all this?" "You did," Nora said softly. "You saw possibility when all I could see was pain." Wade shook his head. "I saw courage. Still do, every day." As darkness settled around them and the first stars appeared overhead, Nora leaned against her husband's shoulder, their son nestled between them, the most tangible symbol of how far they'd come. Behind them, through the open window, the sheet music for Nora's latest composition lay on the piano, a piece she'd titled simply "Waiting," dedicated to the man who had taught her that some things in life were worth waiting for. And Wade Lancaster, watching his wife's face in the gathering twilight, silently thanked whatever twist of fate had led him behind that general store on a spring morning 5 years ago, to find a frightened bride who couldn't bear to be touched, but who had eventually found her way home to his heart.